About 3 years ago, my father experienced a tragedy, immediately followed by a horrifying incident related to that tragedy. Remarkably, this entire series of events occurred and ended on the road. There is a large, busy intersection not far from our house that my father crosses every day on his way home from work. The traffic light there is quite long, so drivers, seeing that it is not flashing, often do not even slow down when passing the intersection. That's where the tragedy happened. My father is the most careful driver I've ever seen. In all his years of driving, he's only had one accident when some idiot rear-ended him. Otherwise, he always drives 35 mph around town and has an impeccable driving record. That day he was calmly driving in the right lane when the light turned green and he didn't need to slow down. In the blink of an eye, he did. As he drove past the crosswalk, he noticed movement among the people waiting to cross with the edge of his eye. A small, dark figure passed right in front of his car, and there was a thud. His father hit the brakes and jumped out of the car. In the middle of the road, spreading his arms, lay a boy of about 12 years old. The ambulance was not in time. He hit the bumper and died from the impact. You can imagine the confusion my father was in. Technically, he hadn't done anything wrong, but he was devastated and couldn't forgive himself for taking a child's life. When they investigated, several witnesses said that the boy had been pushed into the road by a group of his classmates, twins and a big red-headed goon. Apparently, these idiots decided to play a joke and push Freddie, that was the boy's name, to scare him. The twins were the instigators, and the redhead was the one who pushed him forcefully. It was unfathomable that the prank cost the kid his life, and my father struggled to recover, never being able to bring himself to drive again. He eventually sold the car, but the tragic part is only the beginning of the horror story. The three jerks suffered no real consequences. They were under 14 years old, so they didn't face any charges. Their parents either paid some sort of compensation or settled something privately. And my father was not found guilty of the crime, although the victim's parents didn't really blame him. But the guilt weighed on him, and he began to drink, frequenting a small bar near that fateful intersection. One night, when he went out for a smoke, the moment seemed to coincide. The red-haired guy was waiting at the crosswalk as usual. Cars whizzed by without slowing down. And then he just, jumped out in front of one. At least that's how it was reported. But my father swore to me it wasn't like that. The boy was launched on a trajectory no human could have achieved. He was pushed from behind, but he stood there alone. The car that hit him was going so fast that the boy flew 50 feet from the impact. He died instantly, right in front of my father. You could write it off as a tragic coincidence if it weren't for another disturbing detail. About a month later, my mother learned that these twin boys had been in a serious car accident and in their father's car. The man himself was mostly okay, just a few bruises and a broken rib. But the twins were badly hurt. One had a quadruple leg fracture, the other had his face torn by a metal bar. And it was only 2 days before the red-haired boy died. I saw those twins a few months ago. I didn't even recognize them at first, but then I noticed that one of them had a huge scar across his cheek, and the other had a noticeable limp. At least they didn't die under the wheels, I thought to myself at the time. An incredible chain of events. A father innocently gets into a tragic accident, then finds himself on the brink of despair and witnesses something even more horrific happening before his eyes. And the possible connection between the three boys, two of whom are horribly injured shortly before the death of the third, raises so many disturbing questions. I can't imagine the weight on my father's shoulders, the guilt and anguish he must feel as he relives those moments over and over again. To lose a child is unthinkable, but to find himself powerless to prevent further tragedy is just awful. It is a story that defies explanation, a series of shocking coincidences that cannot be believed. All I can say is that I'm glad I wasn't in my father's shoes that day, or any of the days since. The human psyche can take a lot,